Hello students, good morning. Let's start today's class. Dear student, we are on the lesson chapter 6, that is weather and climate, and before this we had already discussed about what is weather, what is climate, what is the difference between weather and climate, and what are the similarities in between weather and climate. And now today we are going to see what causes changes in the climatic condition. Dear student, as we know, on the earth, the planet on which we are living, that is earth, and on the earth different climatic regions are there, different climate on the different parts of the countries. So why this climatic condition changes according to area? So we will discuss about this thing, that what is the reason and what are the causes behind change in the climatic conditions. So let's start today's class. What causes changes in the climatic conditions? Heat from the sunlight, air temperature, and water bodies. Heat from the sunlight, air temperature, and water bodies are the main factors affecting the climate and temperature of a place. Dear student, these are the three factors that affects our climate, and affecting the climate and temperature, these are the three factors. Heat from the sunlight, the part of the earth which get directly heat of the sun, will be hot region, and on the other hand, the part of the land which get poor sunlight, there will be cold climate. Air temperature, dear student, air temperature, if air temperature is high, then there will be summertime, and the when air temperature will be low, then that place will receive cold climate. So different parts of the world, different parts of the country have different climate. And next is water bodies. The distance from the water bodies is also responsible in climatic changing in climatic condition. We will discuss these points in more detail. So next is, some parts of the earth get more sunlight and hence they get heated more, whereas other part receives poor sunlight and hence remain cool. So this is the reason behind the sunlight. And next is, first point is equator, the biggest gainer of sunlight. Equator, the biggest gainer of sunlight. This is the first cause. This is the first cause changing in the climatic condition. So, equator, the biggest gainer of sunlight. Dear student, how and why equator is called the biggest gainer of sunlight? Dear student, just for example, just suppose it is earth and it is equator, 0 degree, it is equator, and it is sunlight. So when sunlight started falling, this area near the equator get direct sunlight. So it is called equator the biggest gainer of sunlight, because on the other part of the earth sunlight falls but it bounces. Sunlight falls but it's bounces, and these region where sunlight get scattered or bounces, these region get less or poor sunlight. So equator is the biggest gainer of sunlight, because it it receives direct heat of the sun. So it is called biggest gainer of sunlight. The sun rays directly fall, you can see here, the sun rays directly fall on the equator and hence it remains hot. Equator remains hot because it gains direct heat from the sun. As we move up or down the equator to the poles, as we just suppose it is equator, it is equator, and when we move towards the pole, it is north pole and it is south pole. When we move from equator towards north pole and towards south pole, as we move up or down the equator to the poles, the amount of direct sunlight reduces. Yes, student, as we move far from the equator towards the pole, that area receives poor sunlight or less sunlight. That's why their temperature is cooler in comparison with equator, because equator gain direct heat of the sun. That's why it is called equator is a direct gainer or bigger gainer of the sunlight. The amount of direct sunlight reduces. Beta, when any part of the land gain less sunlight, the temperature will be low of that place. But when we talk about the equator receives direct sunlight from the sun. So the area nearby the equator get high temperature. There will be high temperature in comparison with near by the polar region. So it is called, as we move up or down the equator to the poles, the amount of direct sunlight reduces. Hence, area near the poles are cooler than those near the equator. Yes, student, this is the reason the equator, at the equator there is high temperature, and nearby the poles where that part gain poor sunlight, so that part is that part will gain less sunlight, and the part of the area there will be cooler climate or cooler condition. Hence, area near the poles are cooler than those near the equator. This is all about the equator, the biggest gainer of sunlight. Next is, how high are we from the sea level? How are we high from the sea level? Sea level means height from the sea level, that is called altitude. As we move, how high are we from the sea level means altitude. Altitude means beta, altitude means height from the height from the sea level. Altitude means height from the sea level. So here, how high are we from the sea level? This also affects the climatic condition of a place. The altitude, there is opposite relation in altitude and temperature. Dear student, there is opposite relation between altitude and temperature. You can see here, when altitude is high, then temperature will be low. Altitude is high means height from the sea level is more, is greater than, means we are on the hill station. At that time our altitude is high and their temperature is low. And on the other hand, when our altitude is low, then temperature will be high. On the plains where we are living, it is called that their altitude is low, and we gain high temperature. On the other hand, in the summertime, when we plan our summer vacation to the hill station, there on the hill station altitude is so high. So when altitude is high, then temperature will be low. So my dear student, keep in mind, there is opposite relation between altitude and temperature. There is opposite relation between altitude and temperature. When altitude will be high, then temperature will be low, and when altitude is low, then temperature will be high. Keep in mind. The altitude at which we live determines the amount of chill we feel. The altitude at which we live means the height where we are living. The height where we are living determines means निश्चित करता है the altitude at which we live, वो ऊंचाई जहाँ पे हम लोग रहते हैं वो क्या निश्चित करता है, the amount of chill we feel, हम कितनी ठंडक महसूस करते हैं, ये कौन डिसाइड करता है, the altitude at which we are living. So you can understand how altitude is important for us. As the air pressure is high at the sea level. At the sea level, the air pressure is high. Air pressure is high at the sea level. But as we move up from the sea level, the air pressure tends to decrease. The air pressure tends to decrease. It expands due to the low pressure. It expands due to the low pressure because on the height there is low pressure and gets colder. Hence we experience colder temperature. We experience colder temperature at higher altitude, like at the high hill station. So my dear student, in this point you have to keep in mind one thing, that is altitude and temperature. Relation between altitude is temperature is opposite. When altitude will be high, then temperature will be low, and when altitude will be low, then temperature will be high. For example, on the plane where we are living, their altitude is low, means यहाँ पे हाइट हमारी कम है, सी लेवल से हमारी जो हाइट है वो कम है। बेटा किसी भी जगह की, चाहे वो हिल स्टेशन हो, चाहे लैंड हो, चाहे कोई भी प्लेस हो अर्थ पे, उसकी हाइट उस प्लेस की नापी जाती है सी लेवल से। तो हम लोग प्लेन पे रह रहे हैं, प्लेन पे रहने का मतलब यह है कि हम लोग लो एल्टीट्यूड पे हैं, इसलिए टेम्परेचर हम लोग हाई फील करते हैं, यहाँ पे गर्मी ज़्यादा फील करते हैं। मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम इन 12 मंथ मेजर पार्ट we enjoy summer time. So on the other hand, on the hill station where we can say there is high altitude, so there is low temperature. So the relation between altitude and temperature is opposite. Keep in mind, and remaining part we will discuss it by tomorrow. So enjoy your day, have a nice day.